Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett along with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and we bring in a couple of attorneys to discuss access to courts today.
Yes, access to justice is always a topic that everyone is concerned about. We want to try to identify today impediments to our system that keep people from having access to court and what that means to get their wrongs remedied. We've got two guests today that will do an excellent job talking about that.
And we'll get to it. You're watching The Verdict, and we'll be right back.
One of my first experiences working in TV, I was a production assistant. I was like, ask me to do anything and I'll do it. I'm just here to work hard. And so I think that eagerness goes a long way. My name is Ezekiel Walker. I am a TV producer in Los Angeles, and I am Chickasaw. As a kid, I saw the opportunity behind the lens to capture great stories. And I feel as though that's my purpose in life. And really close to my heart is the stories of my own people. There's a need to represent Native Americans and minorities in a genuine way. The Chickasaw Nation started with strong ancestors. It started with survivors. I have a responsibility to not let that be in vain, but to work hard and to keep moving forward and to keep conquering.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're really pleased to welcome to the set of The Verdict two lawyers that I've known for a number of years, one for a lot of years and the other not quite as many, but both folks I respect greatly. To my right is John Branum. John is the principal of the Branum Law Firm. They have offices in Oklahoma City and Dallas. John did his undergraduate work at Oklahoma State University, did his law work at Oklahoma University, has been a personal injury lawyer for 13 years now. That's his primary practice. He's represented over 2,000 Oklahomans, and he's a member in good standing, of course, of the Oklahoma Bar, and he's a good friend of mine. John, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Kent, for having me. I appreciate it.
On my left is a friend I've known for even longer, Ed Abel. This is his second appearance on The Verdict. Ed is the senior partner in the Abel Law Firm here in Oklahoma City. He did his undergraduate work at the University of Oklahoma, did his law work also at the University of Oklahoma, where he graduated with the highest honors, including being president of his class. In 1976, he started his own firm and has been with that firm ever since. He does personal injury practice. He has not only done it, he has taught it at the University of Oklahoma as an adjunct at the College of Law. And he has many, many honors that I could take the rest of the show listing, one of which, however, is being a fellow in the American College of Trial Lawyers and a longtime friend. Ed, glad to have you.
Well, thank you.
Welcome you both to this show. I'd like you to just generally describe the major areas of practice. John, why don't you go first?
Well, sure. And before I get started, I just want to again say thank you to Kent for allowing me to be on the show, and what an honor it is to be here with you and also with Mick Cornett and Ed Abel. Ed Abel is one of the lawyers that younger lawyers like me look to really admire and try to be like, and so it's such a great honor to be here on the set with him. And Ed and I's practices are similar in the sense that we both handle personal injury, wrongful death, cases against insurance companies. And so what that means is effectively we're representing families. We're representing family members who oftentimes have either lost a loved one or a family member who's been injured, many times catastrophically injured as a result of someone else's decision, their choice to drive recklessly or to behave recklessly in one way or another. So our practice is, a lot of people will say we're personal injury lawyers, and in my mind, in many ways, we're family lawyers because we're representing families, always representing Oklahoma families against a corporation. Many times, the family, when they first call, they're really concerned because they don't want to be perceived as one of those people out there that have to get involved in litigation or they have to bring a lawsuit. And so one of the impediments that I'm sure Ed may also be able to echo this, a lot of times that initial phone call, that initial meeting, one of the things someone has to come to grips with is they're going to participate in the legal system. And many people in Oklahoma are very reluctant to do that. And so that's what we do. We represent families in those types of cases.
Ed?
Well, John said it very well. We represent people who have been injured. It may be a medical malpractice case. It may be an automobile accident, an airplane crash. It can be in any kind of injury case, any kind where someone is injured through someone else's fault or for a defective design of a piece of equipment or something like that. But we represent people who have been injured. Now, it does affect families. And so I think John made an excellent description of what we do.
Well, Ed, how did you decide to go into that field?
Well, I was sent to college by my parents to be a teacher. They were both teachers. And in fact, my dad thought lawyers were probably 90%, they were very smart, but probably about 95% dishonest. And he was not very happy when I was a freshman at OU, and I just decided, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be a teacher. And so I majored in political science and public speaking. And I just was attracted to the idea of being an attorney. And of course, in high school and at OU, I was on the debate team, and so I had a lot of experience in discussing situations, political situations, and debating those. Mm-hmm. And so I decided I wanted to go to law school. And then in law school, we were instructed, after our first year of law school, we were instructed to try to find a job with a law firm, part-time, to get that experience. And so I found a job with a firm called the Lampkin and Wolf firm in Oklahoma City, and their practice was personal injury litigation and always representing the plaintiff. And so I worked with them for about 10 years and then decided to go on my own. Now, I have done some additional type work, but most of my practice has been personal injury, but I have defended a murder trial, and I've represented some people who've been in divorces and things like that. But probably I would say about 99% of my practice has been plaintiff's personal injury litigation.
Ed, let me ask you a little unrelated question, but I think it's very interesting. You also have been involved in preserving wildlife in Oklahoma for many, many years. Can you describe that involvement?
Well, I'll be happy to. When I was very young, my dad used to do a lot of hunting, and I started hunting with him, and we would squirrel hunt. Then when I got old enough, he started letting me go coon hunting, and I really enjoyed that.
And where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in several small towns around Oklahoma, and ended up in Bethel, Oklahoma, and then in Hydro, Oklahoma, and then ultimately in Oklahoma City. And I loved being in the woods. I loved going fishing and hunting and things of that nature. And when I got on my own, I had some coon dogs, and we used to hunt those and used to show them in competition, and we hunted them in competition, and really traveled all over the country doing that, primarily in the eastern part of the United States. And then I was appointed by the governor to serve as in the Wildlife Commission, and I served, it's an 8-year term, and I served 16 years in the Oklahoma Wildlife Commission, and trying to make sure that there were laws that allowed people to hunt, and laws that would make sure that the hunters did certain activities to stay within the law and that kind of thing. And so I was very involved in the political part of that.
John, you've been doing the practice that you have now for about 13 years, and you've done it just full-time, day and night, as I know from the time I get emails from you sometimes. But how has your practice changed or evolved since you began to where it is now?
Well, I would say that I think that there's been somewhat of a shift, in my view, in the way that people are seeing lawyers a little bit more positively in the last few years, which is maybe surprising. Ed mentioned that his dad maybe thought lawyers had a little bit of a negative view there, and I would say that's true for a lot of folks in Oklahoma to some degree, that there's a negative view there sometimes. But it seems like in the last few years, for some reason, I've been beginning to sense that folks are beginning to have a little bit more positive view towards attorneys. And I think part of that is some of the lawyer groups that are out there have been really making a concerted effort to do that. So there's a group in the south side of Oklahoma City, for example, around Thanksgiving time, is now giving out a tremendous number of turkeys. And it's becoming a huge event, and they're partnering with other groups. And so that's something I'm seeing a lot of. I'm also seeing there's a group up in Edmond, a law group up there, that they're giving out backpacks to the kids every year. I know there's another group that's doing Christmas presents. So it seems like, even though those things may not seem like much, that's a big piece. Also, I know Ed in the past has gone out around the state, and he's made a concerted effort to talk to various groups, to educate groups about why our civil justice system is so important to protecting our communities and keeping our families safe, and the importance of our court system. So I think as lawyers continue to do that, and to remember to go out and to try to explain to folks why our system is so important to other people, that's making a difference. And I think that with more information, with the growing use of the internet and smartphones and things like that, people are beginning to realize that when they find themselves in a situation that they need some representation, that many times their opponent is a very, very skilled, highly sophisticated operation that has put a lot of time, a lot of thought into how to litigate. And when it's a family versus a company, it's many times a difficult thing. So I think there's a lot of things going on, but I think that with a lot of new information, a lot of new thought, it seems like it's getting a little better out there.
John Branum and Ed Abel are personal injury attorneys in Oklahoma City, and we're going to talk about some of the impediments of getting access to the court system when we return in our next segment on The Verdict.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. We're visiting with personal injury attorneys Ed Abel and John Branum. And Kent, I think we wanted to try to get to the idea that that the courts have to remain accessible to everyone.
Yeah. Ed, I'm going to ask John the same question here in just a second, but what's your view on the importance of the citizens having access to the court system when they feel like they've got something that's happened?
Well, it's extremely important. You know, for example, I'll talk about one particular case. I won't mention any names or anything like that, but we had a 35-year-old man that was married and had 3 kids, and he worked in the oil field, and he was injured in an accident that was not his fault. It was somebody else's fault, and he ended up losing his arm, his left arm. And he'll never work again in the oil field, and he didn't have any other training to work anywhere else. He made an income of about $150,000 a year, and that was lost after he was injured. Well, now what's that man going to do? He's got to have somebody help him, and the insurance company for the people who were at fault and caused that accident weren't paying him anything. So what does he do? If he doesn't have access to the court, if he doesn't have a right to bring his claim and be heard by a jury of 12 people who can compensate him, I don't know what he's going to do. And so that's what we do. We represent people like that who have been injured, who have a right to come and appear in front of a judge and in front of a jury, and have that jury or that judge say, here is what you're entitled to receive from the insurance company for the people who injured you. And it's critical to their being able to get along. It's critical for them to be able to support their families, that kind of a thing, when they have severe injuries. Now, not everybody that we represent has that severe of an injury, but we represent people who have lost income, they've been out of work, they've been disfigured, or things like that, and the only way they have to right the boat, so to speak, in their life is to be able to present their situation to a judge and to a jury.
Well, Ed, in what era in American history did this kind of right emerge? Because it's my understanding in the Industrial Revolution, you heard all sorts of stories about people who would get injured or maimed and that didn't seem to receive any sort of reimbursement for their injuries. When did this start becoming more of an issue?
Well, I don't know. I can't tell you a date or anything like that, but I know that it's developed over the years, and I would say beginning in the 1940s and forward, there has been more and more legislation passed by our state legislature and by legislators around the country to allow people to present their claims. And so I would say, you know, since about sometime in the 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
John, your thoughts?
Well, and there you're talking about the workers' compensation system, I assume. So some people say it's like the great compromise, right? So, you know, where on the one hand, you don't have to necessarily prove the employer is at fault for causing you to get injured, but on the other hand, you have some compensation, but a lot less compensation. And so that system has played a role in allowing injured workers in Oklahoma to be able to have some recovery. But generally speaking about access to the courts, you know, one of the most difficult things to do as a lawyer is when someone calls you and they need help and you can't help them. And that's very, very, it's really difficult for me sometimes to figure out how to tell someone, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this case. And many times it's because of the way that the rules are set up, the statutes are set up, the case law is set up. There are some instances where people have been wronged and they ought to be able to have a case, but because of something that's happened in the law, they realistically don't have a financially feasible case to pursue. An example of that in Oklahoma is medical malpractice cases. There are a lot of restrictions and a lot of requirements in a medical malpractice case to be able to bring that sort of case. And so it's very, very difficult for a plaintiff lawyer in Oklahoma to take a medical malpractice case. They're extremely expensive. They're hard-fought cases. The doctors have, you know, some of the best lawyers in the state, great lawyers representing them, and they're going to fight you tooth and nail. And so a medical malpractice case in the state of Oklahoma by most plaintiff lawyers is real tough for them to take a case unless it's a really, really strong case. So that's one area where people many times, they have legitimately been suffered a wrong as a result of a doctor's screw up, but they simply cannot bring the lawsuit to court. And you see a lot of that. And that's one area. There's other areas as well. A lot of times car dealers, for example, that might make a mistake or do something dishonest, and someone's been wronged, the family member's been wronged from that. It's difficult to bring those cases. And there's other instances of that. There are different areas where people don't have access to be able to come to court and let 12 people hear the case and make a decision. Ultimately, the way the system is supposed to be designed, as I understand it, you're supposed to be able to get in front of your peers in the community, a jury, and allow the jury to hear the facts, hear the evidence, and make a decision based on what the law is. And there are some interests out there that will put impediments to that, put something between you and the jury that prevent you from being able to actually be heard and have your case adjudicated by 12 average citizens. That's ultimately, to me, the big issue. And to me, it's the conservative approach. The conservative approach is to allow all the evidence, all the information to be put in front of a jury and allow a jury to make a decision.
John mentioned, if I may,
Sure.
John mentioned the medical malpractice case, and of course, we handle a lot of medical malpractice cases, but there's something about a medical malpractice case that's different than a lot of cases. In a medical malpractice case, if you bring a medical malpractice case, when you go to trial, the plaintiff has what they call the burden of proof. And the burden of proof means that you got to have a doctor in a medical malpractice case that will come in and say that the medical care that you have received from the defendant fell below acceptable medical standards. In other words, it wasn't proper. And secondly, that it's caused an injury that shouldn't have happened. Now, one of the biggest problems that you have in a medical malpractice case is doctors don't want to testify against another doctor. And I worried about that, and I had a medical malpractice case, and I was having trouble getting a doctor to testify. And I asked this one doctor who had seen my client, and he said, yes, there's no question, this client wasn't treated right, but I'm not going to testify. And I said, well, I'll subpoena you. He said, I don't care. He said, I'll lie. And I said, lie, you'll be under oath. He said, let me tell you something. I get other patients referred to me by other doctors. And if I testify against a doctor, I won't get any other referrals, and they'll put me out of business. Now, it's that kind of thing that's going on behind the scenes a lot of times. We handle medical malpractice cases, and sometimes we have to go out of state to get a doctor to review the medical records to see whether or not the doctor will testify. And if he says yes, then we'll use him. But sometimes we have to go out of state. Now, sometimes not all doctors do that. Sometimes doctors will testify, but it is really difficult in a medical malpractice case to get a doctor to testify against another doctor or against the hospital.
John, we don't have a whole lot of time, but most people get their impressions about your profession, and maybe lawyers in general, from the sitcoms they watch on television or perhaps movies they've seen. What misperceptions are available? I'll give you 30 seconds to clear up all those misperceptions that might be out there.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. But all I can tell you is you ought to go to some of the lawyers' offices that serve people. My dad's a great example. He's a solo practitioner out in Newcastle. He does bankruptcies for folks. Started off putting signs up all over southern Oklahoma that said bankruptcy $295, and for $295 you get a bankruptcy. And so he really serves people and helps change their lives for the positive. And so I think the biggest way to change that would be to get to know one of our really good lawyers like Ed or Kent or my dad or other ones that have really spent a lot of time serving Oklahomans.
All right, John Branum and Ed Abel, personal injury lawyers, here to discuss a number of issues, but it's been a good show.
Indeed.
Thank you both for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Kent and I'll have a final word when we get back.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here, drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now and 6 years ago, I do it legally. I wanted to, because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love. but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be Mom and Dad to me.
I really think people are so unaware of the number of kids waiting just in Oklahoma. And I think if more people knew that those children were out there waiting, I think that just by the way we live our lives and the people we talk to, that maybe we can help encourage adoption from Oklahoma.
You will always be Mom and Dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and two very distinguished attorneys joined us on the show today.
Well, yes, indeed, and two good friends. In some limited circles, there's some really misconceptions about the integrity and the ability of folks that set out in the practice of law to help other folks. And these two guys are really good examples of the cream of the crop. They're the best.
We always like to give website information about our guest. You can get more information about John at branumlawfirm.com. That's branumlawfirm.com. And Ed Abel's group is at abellawfirm.com. That's abellawfirm.com. And Kent and I have a website for this show. It's called theverdict.tv. You can log on, tell us about a guest you'd like to see on a future edition of the show, or a subject that you'd like to see us discuss. That's going to do it for this week's show. We appreciate you taking your time and joining us. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We will see you next week right here for another edition of The Verdict.